Great. Hello, everyone. So today we have the pleasure to host Miss Lise Laurin, the CEO of EarthShift, a very actually well-known LCA consulting company that does a lot of kind of successful case studies. And I think we first know each other, Lisa. That was about 2 years ago. The ISST conference back in Colorado. And then we got introduced by our mutual friend, Professor Reed Miller. And then I think back, I'll probably kind of see you in the even earlier ISST conference or other conferences. We just didn't recognize that because you are a longtime kind of member of the society and made a lot of contribution to not only I think the technical part of the LCA community, but also like really help to raise the next generation of talent, right? The students and you support the student committee of ISST. So um, so that's why I really appreciate we have the opportunity to have you here to have a shorter conversation about your view about LCA and some advice for the students. But before I actually delve into this, I would probably uh, ask you to give us a little bit of the story about EarthShift and what was your motivation to start an LCA company and your own story.
Sure. So I'll take you way back to when I graduated from college and got my first job. I was a process engineer at Intel, and I had no computer on my desk. In fact, we had no computer in our department
At Intel.
at Intel.
Oh,
This was a long time ago, and as you can imagine, we were changing the world. Within a couple of years, we all had computers, right? So it was a very exciting time. And I actually spent 20 years in the semiconductor industry. From Intel, I moved into the supplier side. And through that process, I got to know all kinds of information about manufacturing. I learned about machine shops and clean rooms and airflow control and all types of manufacturing equipment, chemical vapor deposition and photolithography equipment, all kinds of different things, which ended up helping me out a lot when I started to do LCA. But 20 years after I started in the industry, we were starting to put high definition TVs in people's houses. Not quite so exciting anymore. At the same time, I had an environmental illness. We had had an oil spill in our house,
oh,
and I was sick. I spent a lot of time working with alternative practitioners to heal
mhm.
because the medical profession didn't know what to do with me. And at a certain point, they said, "We've done what we can with your body. You have to do something with your mind and your spirit." So I started doing soul searching and realized that I had a passion to help the planet. So and actually at that point, I had already started a company.
Mhm.
So I looked around and none of the nonprofits would hire me. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to start a company to help industry do better with the planet. And then I found life cycle assessment and SROI, sustainable return on investment, as two things that I thought would help industry do better with the planet. So I started the company, and then I learned how to do those things.
Yeah. So I think this is a fascinating story. So to me, there are two very important takeaways. One is that sometimes your passion is really just waiting to be discovered, but in your case, it's kind of really significant event in your life. Then you kind of you discover your. I'm assuming that's lifelong passion for making our living place a better planet. And second one is as an entrepreneur, right? So usually you ask entrepreneurs like, why did you start a company or why did you make this product? The answer is, I don't have the product I want in the market, so that's why I want to do it, right? So I really kind of appreciate they actually share the story and these two very important takeaways for the audience. Yeah. So that's how you started your consulting company, and then has been having some years, right? So and I'm pretty sure you have a lot of success. So can you tell us probably one example, like what is EarthShift most famous for? So when people talk about EarthShift, what do you think will people give you like the shiniest kind of label on your?
I think it's if it's a short label, we do the hard projects and we do them really well.
Mhm.
So we do the difficult comparative studies, and we do them with that little extra, making sure that in all circumstances, if we're saying A is better than B, we've explored all those circumstances. The other side of it is when a company is only in pilot phase, or they just have an idea.
Mhm.
How do they do an LCA at that point? That's where we shine. We can do that where a lot of companies just, they don't, if you don't have data, then they can't do the LCA. Whereas we can kind of work with, oh, we're not quite sure of this piece yet. So, all right, well, we'll put some stuff in and show you what it looks like. And then that may help you with your next step, with your next decisions.
Yeah. So you find a really good kind of market niche that actually not every company can have. I guess you probably also have the right talent in your team as well to do this. And another important uh, message I hear from you is really uh, to do things right. And you need probably sometimes you have to put extra time and dedication to make sure you deliver a product that was high quality. That's how you earn people's trust, right? Because LCA world is kind of like a small world. People know you by word of mouth. So yeah, so that's that's very very helpful for the students, I think, right? So sometimes you know, we may actually, under pressure, we may want to sometimes feel like, oh, maybe we can cut corner or something. But as you mentioned, it's going to come back, right? So having a high quality work is very important. Yep.
And I'll just add to that that
Mhm.
sometimes it means telling the client that no, your product isn't better than the competition.
Yeah, that's the hard
And,
part.
and that's part of that quality that we provide is we don't make the LCA say what the client wants.
Yeah. So actually, that's actually making me thinking. So do you see overall, like when you first, for example, the first time you tell the client, well, the results are not as good as compared to like let's say 20 years later to tell the client. So does that become easier for you to say, not only from your perspective because you say a lot, but also from the audience, the recipient side? Are they more understanding in this case?
Sometimes they're not.
Oh, okay.
Um,
You're not.
right. Sometimes just don't understand.
Okay.
But we try really hard to educate them
Okay.
so that they understand it. And the other piece is we try and show them here's why, and here are the things that you can do so that you are better.
Yeah. So this is about not only generating numbers, but also give them actionable recommendations. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
that's very, very helpful because when I teach LCA, sometimes students give recommendations like, let's use more renewable electricity. I always use this example. But what if you already 97% of hydropower here in BC, right? So you need to give people some concrete, actionable recommendations so they actually trust you. We go back to the trust, right? So you want to build this trust relationship. That's very, very helpful advice. Then let's actually actually that's a specific question for you because you're CEO, but you start with doing LCA yourself. So you play different roles. So I wonder now as a CEO, uh, what what kind of difference do you feel as compared to like LCA practitioner? You also did calculation as well, right? So um, yeah.
I don't do too much of that anymore, actually.
Oh, you did before. Now you do
I
the
did,
you're a
yeah.
CEO. So the shift, like what do you learn from the shift?
Yeah, so it is quite a shift. because I'm much more dealing with human beings
Hmm.
than with numbers.
Yeah.
And so I need to really make sure that my team is happy, that they have the right amount of information, because if they don't get enough information, they get upset. And if they have too much information, they say, I don't have time for this. Managing the workload so that they're not overworked. That actually becomes easier as we have become bigger.
Hmm.
For the really small companies, and when we were really small, it was a case where we really had to be all stretched really hard before we could afford and could justify an additional person.
Hmm.
We're in much better shape now that we don't have to all be so stretched before we bring somebody else on. So that's another change.
Hmm.
We also have brought on the software, and we have a new tool that we're developing. So I've been very involved in that.
Yeah, thank you
And
for sharing
so
with me.
that's
I actually tested it. So very, very cool.
you. What's that?
I think that's very cool. I actually send some feedback to your teammate as well. So thank you for giving me the, the sneak peek of the tool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so the reason I'm asking this is because I have some students who are really inspired to have their own business, and I just want to kind of, as I did, to pick your brain about being a CEO, being a founder, what that actually takes, right? You need to not only manage it yourself, but sometimes and that's a lucky thing, right? So you have people to manage. How do you keep your business grow? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
The other thing I would say to them is take your time,
Mhm.
because you can learn a lot from other businesses.
Mm.
So go work for another business, see what they're doing right, see what they're doing wrong,
Yeah.
understand what you need to know, because you don't just need to know a technical expertise. You need to know finance. You need to know marketing. At least to get yourself off the ground, you need sales. You need to know how to sell yourself and your product.
Mhm.
And you're not going to just go from zero to what we have, right? 25 people. You're
Yeah.
not going to go to that overnight. It takes some time, and in that meantime, you're going to need to wear all those hats, and it's not easy, and it's not something you can just pick up from a book so easily sometimes.
Yeah, that's very, very valuable advice. Yeah, so really, so yeah, think about starting a business. It's not really just kind of click of a button, right? So it's all those things you need to think about. Yeah. Okay, so I think next we can talk a little bit about your observation in LCA community, right? So you work with different type of clients, you work with the government, you work with the industry standard, you work with us, like academias as well, right? So probably what are the biggest trends you see in this particular community? For example, um, when when you look at the application in LCA, where are people going in terms of policy making? Yeah, we can start with that question probably. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And when I started, there were very few people in the US who knew what LCA was,
Mm.
US or Canada. Very, very few. And that's changed dramatically, where it's much more in business, at least a very common term and a common technique. So that has been, I would say, a really big change. The other
Mm.
change that I'm seeing now within both the US and the Canadian governments is more of a reliance on LCA for policy. In Canada, you have the Clean Fuel Standard,
Right.
very much relying on its greenhouse gas accounting, but it's using an LCA perspective.
Yeah, that's a very important difference always emphasized in my course.
Yeah, yeah, and we're still in the for most government, we're still talking about just greenhouse gases. We're not looking at anything else. But they're calling it LCA, which means we can add the rest later,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
it's a step. It's an important step. In the US, we've got some tax credits that are for reducing, really changing how we use carbon dioxide. So those are helpful. Seeing other policies change, a lot more money going into it, both from the governments and from corporate areas. So that's a big change too.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And you also touch upon a little bit on the, for example, the private sectors, right? So um, when I kind of try to search for a position for my student as example, I see probably more and more kind of LCA title kind of positions in this kind of, for example, PNG. PNG is kind of has a long history of LCA people, right? So, and I see more like this. So do you see that as a competition to a business, or is more like a complement? Yeah.
No, not to our business for sure, because often a practitioner within a company, of course, if they're at P&G, they can be doing LCA every day.
Yep.
But in most companies, they're doing it once every 6 months, they've got a project, right? And so you all know how hard the LCA software is to use. You go away from it for 6 months, you have to teach yourself it all over again. So when they come up with a difficult project, and even large companies will come to us, we want to do a comparative study, and we want to publish it to the world, and nobody's going to believe it if we do it. So we need you to do it. So they come to us for that. They'll come to us for some of the anticipatory work, although we try and teach them how to do it themselves. A lot of our goal is really capacity building, whether it be the work that we're doing with you, trying to build capacity at UBC, or whether it's work that we're doing with large clients, small clients, teach them as much as we can so that they can do as much as they can on their own.
Okay, so I like this kind of mindset. It's like, to me, because I always think of, so an analogy is we basically make the cake bigger, right? So that every piece you get is actually bigger. That's a very healthy kind of mindset. So yeah. So next question for you is, what is the, let's say, the biggest gap you see? For example, let's say if you have, I guess you have a wish list, right? So what is the top item on your wish list in terms of LCA that you can magically kind of solve problem with, right?
Yeah, so my first
You can have multiple. Doesn't have
two, my first two
yeah.
is the ability to implement under specification in a study,
Okay.
and to implement stochastic multi-attribute analysis in a study. So under specification says that you don't have to know exactly what steel you're putting into something. You can model with all the steel, and find out, okay, does it make a difference or not? Yes, it does. Unless the steel's really small.
Usually
Steel's really important. But sometimes what plastic you use, it doesn't make a difference, right? And so if you're gathering data and you don't know what plastic it is, well, model with this generic plastic, see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't make a difference, just leave that in there.
Yeah.
So that's one piece. The second piece is the ability to have a single score that is not climate change. So with the stochastic assessment, we say, okay, we don't know what's most important. What's going to be most important to us moving forward? Is it human health? Is it ecosystem quality? Right? If we poison ourselves, is that the most important thing? If we kill all our food sources or all our pollinators, is that the most important thing? Or is it resources because we're fighting over them? Because that's what all wars are all over, is the resources. Since we don't know which of those is most important, let's look at stochastically and see if all the different weighting schemes you could have between those different impacts, what's the probability that one thing is better than the other? Right? So these are methodologies that have been developed, but nobody can use because you have to program it yourself.
Yes. So
And
yeah.
and we have put it into our tool, which is going to be released at ACLCA in three
Oh, nice.
weeks in September.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have a tool that will allow you to do that now, and it's going to expand and have lots more capability. But right now, it's available. It will be available for designers.
That's great. So, yeah, I think you touch upon really important kind of fact is that sometimes, your wish list item doesn't have to be like, haven't invented yet. For example, in this case, algorithm statistics, are already there. Just as a LCE practitioner, we need to find a way to implement those things. So that's more like a technical barrier as compared to a knowledge barrier, right? Um, so from the innovation perspective, we should not just focusing on the knowledge barrier, but sometimes technical barrier is more important because now you can benefit a larger community. And thank you to that. Yeah, again, thank you for letting me use the tool. And I think many people attending the ACLC conference in September will benefit from there as well. Really, really appreciate Lisa. So I have one last question. I know we're kind of a little bit up against the time. So what are the, for example, let's say three career advice for the students who want to join this field as, let's say, a LCA consultant?
Yeah.
What advice do you have?
Whether you're going into consulting or going into industry or going
Government.
into government,
Yeah.
get yourself an internship with a manufacturer.
With the manufacturer.
Get yourself into a manufacturing environment if you haven't already been there, because it's really hard to model a manufacturing facility if you've never seen one.
Yeah.
If you have no idea what you're modeling, if it's all fuzzy.
Yep.
It also means that you get an understanding how manufacturing facilities work, right? That there are things that aren't easy to change, and there are other things that are easy to change.
Yes.
And so learning that difference will make you a better advisor to whoever is your client, whether it's internal, external. So that's my biggest piece of advice. And if we have to cut it off here, I'm happy to just leave it with that, because it really makes a huge difference, and I see it in my analysts who have that experience and who don't. It's a big difference. It's really a big difference.
I
So.
I 100% agree because it also that kind of speaks to the, I call it tension between modeler and engineers, right? So as a modeler, I can say, okay, here's the best option. You should change this. Then the engineer will come back like, it's it's not possible for me to change it because it's just not feasible, right? So in order to reduce this tension as a modeler, you should actually understand technology. And as you mentioned, Lisa, ideally get a like an internship or even just have a tour of this facility for like a shadow for example a engineer, then you understand the things a lot better. So yeah, this is a very, very good advice. um, Thank you very much, Lisa. I totally kind of feel inspired by your story and by your insights of the field and also the advice for a student. Thank you very much for spending time with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.